Welcome to the Whisky Wealth Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and on this show, we respect those who respect the craft of fine spirits and think long term about wealth. Now, before I dive in, quick word from my sponsor. This episode was brought to you by Whisky Wealth Mastery, where serious investors learn to build wealth through casks the right way, with data-driven investing in a quietly powerful asset class that historically has delivered between 8 and 12% annual growth. If you wanted to know whether whiskey could be more than something that you just drink, something that you can actually own, grow, and monetize, that's exactly what we do. Find me on LinkedIn and check out the show notes below. Now, if you're gonna play the long game, you may as well play it like a warrior. So today's guest is all about those who want to learn how to take those casks that you've invested in and build your own brand the right way. Because today I'm joined by Conor Begley. He is the co-founder and president of Father's Brewing. Now, that is an award-winning clean beer brand that's reinventing American lager with organic ingredients, dual filtration, and a mission to make better tasting beer you can feel great about. So under Conor's leadership, Father's quickly built a passionate community, raised over 1 million from high profile athletes, industry leaders, and founders, and hitting distributor milestones like whole full placements in just under 3 months of soft launch. So, Conor, absolute privilege having you on the show. Can't wait to dive in, learn more about your new unique experience in building and scaling your father's brand in such a short space of time. So I think this is going to be hugely informative for my listeners. So welcome aboard, bud.
Oh, thanks. I'm gonna have to hire you to be my hype man for all these events. You gave a great intro there. I love it.
Thank you. Well, first questions first. If time travel that became a reality and you had a chance to go back to when you started your career, what would
Yes.
the advice that you would give now to the person that you were once were, your younger self?
Oh boy. I think, some of the only way that you learn, lessons is by like making the mistakes, right? So I actually don't think I would want to like try to kind of stop myself from making some of the mistakes that I did. Otherwise, it just doesn't hit the same way. Like I remember our co-founder and CFO of my first company. We were pushing really hard into Europe very early as a company and more
Mm-hmm.
globally with L'Oreal as a brand. And he's like, I like feel like you should probably focus domestically. Like I feel like you're, stretching yourself too thin. You're like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? And he turned out to be right, right? And so, whenever you get advice that you haven't lived, like it's hard to take it seriously if you disagree with it, right? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so for me, I think I would tell myself just, be confident, press on, it's all going to be great. And, there's always these moments where you feel like everything's breaking, but like you always find a way through, right? You figure a way out. And
Yeah.
so for me, that would probably be the advice is just press on. It's going to be great. Trust your instincts. Yeah, and go for
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Me, I'd probably do the Marty McFly.
it.
I'll, I'll make my money on betting and then I'll build a business behind it when I got the money.
That's true. Invest in Google.
That,
Like this is a very like,
yeah.
some good bets out there.
Yeah. So, Connor, you built Fathers around a very simple belief, that clean beer tastes much better. Now, how did your background influence that philosophy, and how do you define clean in brewing?
Yeah, well, so I started a software company. We bootstrapped that, sold it for 70 million in 2021, right? And during that process, we had a bunch of clients. We were in the social media kind of influencer marketing space, and so we got to
Hmm.
see all of these brands really rise up and do very well. And so one of those brands was a brand called Youth to the People, which was a clean skincare company.
Hmm.
And there were about a dozen or so of these brands that got sold for like 100 million to $1 billion plus. And Youth to the People is one of those brands. And Joe, who's the co-founder and CEO of that brand, is a very good friend.
Hmm.
And so, I was talking with Joe, and I love beer, right? And at the same time, my family, I was watching us, get rid of all the plastic in our house and buy everything organic and do all of these things. And I'm drinking this beer, and I'm like, well, why is this different? Like, there's no, and not only why is it different, but like, why is this the only thing in the grocery aisle in the United States where you don't have ingredient lists, where you don't have any nutritional facts, where there's this real lack of transparency around what's in the product.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, and I think a lot of people dismiss, alcohol drinkers as like, oh, they don't care. It's like, yeah, we care. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course I want to like drink the best thing I can, right? People spend lots of money to do that. And so, so that's what really got us, kind of on this mission. And then, we wanted to validate that it was real. Like, okay, so we know that there's a lack of transparency. We know that, but like, is there actually bad stuff in here, or am I just, wasting my time? And so we spent about $25,000 and ran all of these beers through labs, right? Tested them for everything, and tried to figure out, well, what are the problems in beer? And there's a few core problems. So first problem is heavy metals. So that's lead, that's arsenic, right? Those show up very commonly. They typically come from herbicides and pesticides that are sprayed on the crops. So that's the first problem, arsenic and lead. The second problem is Roundup, right? Roundup's on, all of the crops, and, beer is no different. And so every beer you drink that is non-organic, which is basically 99% of beers in the United States, has
Yeah.
just a truckload of Roundup on it, right? It's called glyphosate. And we know that that's not good for you. And then the final problem is, people are getting weird about plastic water bottles, right? Well, turns out that, if you drink an IPA or a pale ale, anything that has a lot of hop character, those will have between 20 to 40 times the plastic content of a, plastic water bottle, right?
That's
So
unbelievable.
it's crazy. And so, so he said, okay, well, these are the problems. So how do we fix them? And the way that you fix them is you start with organic ingredients. That gets rid of the lead, the arsenic, and the Roundup. You
Yeah.
use glass bottles, right? Because if you've ever seen kind of the way a can gets melted down, there's an actual plastic liner inside of that can, and that imparts BPA, BPF, other issues. And
Yeah.
then the final step is, well, how do you get the plastic out? Well, we haven't figured out why the hops are contaminated with plastic, but they are universally that we've found. And so we said, okay, well, the only way to get that out is you basically filter it really, really, really finely. So you're filtering down to the wavelength of yellow light in order to actually get that plastic out. And so, then you use really advanced filtration that it's a filtration that we've never seen used on beer before. And so that's kind of how you solve it, those three steps.
Man, when I come to America, I want to fucking taste your beer. It sounds phenomenal.
I mean, we spend a
Are you
lot of time.
are
The
you
big
growing
thing,
out into the Europe? I know it's early days. I know it's early days, but are you thinking about long term, sending it out to the wider world?
definitely working towards that, right? I think that the way that beer works is there's a lot of what you would call network effects, which is like, hey, if I get three restaurants and three grocery stores in three different towns, that will sell okay, right? But if I get three grocery stores and three restaurants all in the same town, it'll do much better, right? It becomes a habit, and it becomes something that the locals get used to, right? And so you really want to kind of, it's like beachhead by beachhead warfare, right? You're taking like city by city by city by city,
Yeah.
and so you want to be very intentional about that. I think of when we spent a lot of time talking to other brand founders, that had raised a lot of money or had some success, and the number one mistake they said they made was expanding too quickly geographically. And
Yeah.
so, so definitely I mean, the ambitions of the brand are big, right? That's the goal. But I think we want to be very intentional and focused about, how we grow.
Yeah. How did you come up with the name Fathers, by the way?
So it was a first name that hit us. And, for me, you think about what is the job of a dad, right? Like I'm a dad, I've got three kids. The job of a dad is to look after the next generation, right? That's what you are responsible for,
Perfect.
right? And so for me, if we can push the conversation forward in this industry and it leads to kind of options that you can feel great about drinking, right? And that don't, harm you as little as they can, I think that that's a really cool thing to do, right? And that's a
Yeah.
way to, look after others. So that was that. Also, it's a good bar call. It was available, which is shocking. So we got the trademark. It's like, oh, grab me a Father's. It's simple. It's one word. A lot of people that drink beer obviously are dads. So yeah, all those things.
Yeah, it worked
And we're
quite
all
nice.
dads, right? So
Yeah, it worked quite nicely.
yeah.
So this is something that I think my listeners who want to break out into their own brands with their own whiskey casks will find extremely, incredibly um, interesting, to be honest.
Yeah.
So getting into Whole Foods within just 3 months, that is super incredible. So, can you walk through the strategy and the conversations that made that happen so fast? And what lessons would you share with founders trying to crack major retail channels?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you got to be very tactical, right? Most people think of alcohol as being a consumer product, and it is, right? But I think that in some ways it's almost more of a B2B business than a B2C business, right? Like you have to go and, sell those people and get them excited about, working with you. And for
Yeah,
me, my prior company, that was my job, right? I was the face of the company. I got people excited. We signed Walmart and Amazon and LVMH and L'Oreal and all these brands, Major League Baseball. And so so thinking about Whole Foods, part of it is knowing who you're going after, right? We're an organic beer brand. Like that was our number one target. We said it was our number one target from the day that we started working on the brand, right? Like this is the place we want to launch. This is where we're going to build our brand. And so we knew it that this was our number one target. And then the question is, well, how do you get their attention, right? There's better ways and there's worse ways of getting their attention. The best way is you get a referral into Whole Foods, right? And the
yeah,
absolute best way is you get multiple referrals at the same time from different sources, all to the same spot, right? Because it's like, it's the same way that you hear like, oh, this is the best sandwich in town, right? You hear it once, like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's from somebody I trust. And then you hear it from somebody else, and you hear it from somebody else, and you're like, oh, I need to like check out who these guys are, right? And
yeah,
so I spent probably 6 to 9 months meeting with every senior executive that I could in the industry, both to learn on like how do you do this? Because we didn't know how to do this category. We're
mm,
still learning. So we met with like the CEO of Sierra Nevada, Price Green. We met with the previous CEO of Sierra Nevada, Jeff White. We flew to Boston. We met with the whole Boston beer team, which is Samuel Adams. We flew to St. Louis and met with all the Budweiser folks, and then met with all the founders we could. And then worked our way to getting 3 or 4 different intros at different levels into Whole Foods.
yeah,
And then ultimately, that gets you in the door, but then the story and the brand has to be something that fits for them. And you
sure.
have to have, in my opinion, it's like our first meeting was with a guy named Dan Barrera, who is, the West Coast buyer for Whole Foods. And like he has a discerning palate, right? Like the beer
Mm,
has to taste really good, right?
yeah,
And so it's a combination of, flavor and story and connections that like get you in, right? And so, yeah, we actually had only soft launch. We were only in kegs at that time. We didn't even have 6 packs designed. We only had sample bottles. And yeah,
that's
and then
amazing.
they're like, hey, we want you. And I was like, oh shit. And
What am I gonna do now?
literally, we didn't have 6 packs designed. It takes 6 weeks to print them. They're like, we want you in September, and it was mid-July, and we'd literally
Shit.
just started selling. So it was cool. I figured it wasn't going to happen for another 6 to 12 months, and then it
Yeah,
happened.
but
So
yeah, that's a phenomenal story. Absolutely phenomenal. And another one that my whiskey entrepreneurs would love to know is how to raise capital.
mhm.
And you raised over 1 million from athletes, founders, industry leaders very, very early on. So, can you tell our listeners and viewers what was your pitch and what made people believe in such a new beer brand so quickly?
Yeah, and we're probably about 1.5 million raised now, and I think and not only that, but we have like the benefit of, I sold my company for, a good chunk of change. My co-founder sold his for even more than that. And so, we have the capital personally to fund this thing, right?
Yeah.
But for me, what I've really latched on to, so Augustus Busch, who was the founder of Budweiser, has this phrase that it's like, we're in the business of making friends, right? And, and you think about that, that's, everybody loves like, oh, my friend started that beer brand, or, oh, my buddy's friend invested in that brand. It's really cool, right? So the more that you build out that community, it becomes very powerful. And so for me, I wanted to get people involved that were either influential, or that, and that could be influential nationally, that could be influential locally, but that could provide some value to the brand and that we're passionate about the brand. And so when you
Yeah.
ask the question about pitch, it's kind of funny. We haven't made a single pitch, right? And we have probably 35 investors now in the brand. And so the thing that I really latch on to is there's this phrase where it says, ask for investment and you'll get advice. Ask for advice and you'll get investment, right?
Investment.
And so what we would do is just go to these really smart, talented people that had some way of helping us in the world and be like, hey, we're starting, we don't know what you're doing. Can you help us out? Can you give us advice, right? And then naturally what happens is when people give you advice, they go, okay, they're thinking about the business and what they would do. Okay, if I was running Fathers, these are the things that I would do based on the things that I know, right? And so then they start to go down this path of, well, hey, actually, this is a pretty good idea. And if I did that, this would do that. And, so they start marching their way down to like, actually, I agree with this. And I think this is something that could be really cool. And, and then they're like, oh, well, I can make this connection for you. I can do this for you or that for you. Or maybe like if they are people that actually invest in private companies, maybe I want to put some money behind it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a combination of that, just doing, and again, it's not, you don't do it disingenuously, right? Like we have learned so much by asking for advice, right? It just so happens that you also end up getting all these extra benefits of maybe somebody wants to put money in, or maybe they want to make a connection or whatever. And then, so I do a combination of that, number one. And then number two, we'll make this is, sorry, this is kind of a long answer, but I think it's quite important.
No,
So that's
it's important.
right. So that's the first one. I think the second one is, there's this really well-written article. It's from 2011. And it says, I invest in lines, not dots. Okay. And this is talking about tech investing, but it's the same thing, which is like, it's like, imagine a chart. So this chart, and there's like, time and success, right, on this chart.
Yeah.
And, the first time somebody meets you, right? Whiskey Warrior meets us. Okay. You've got this point in time. You've met us. We've launched in Whole Foods. We're launching Sprouts. We're launching Bevmo. We've been around for, 5-6 months, right? And, that's your point in time. And then you meet me again 6 months later, right? And like I can be here or I can be here, right? But yet we say I'm here and I'm going up. You go, oh, okay. This is continuing to go up. This is pretty cool. And then, I meet you another 6 months later and I'm up here and then I'm up here, right? All of a sudden you start to chart my trajectory, right? Oh, wow, this is where this company is heading, right?
Mm.
And so for me, what we would do is, or what we're doing now, is, meeting with all the people because these are very capital intensive businesses. And so we're meeting with people that we expect to invest in a year or 2 years or 3 years now, to start to establish those dots, those periods in time, because we
Yeah.
think we're going to execute and show this trajectory. But if we wait 3 years to meet them, they don't have the benefit of having seen that, right? And you can do this both actively, like I actively meet with people to do this, or you can do it much more passively, which I think is actually even more powerful. So if you've seen a lot of the people online that are like building in public, right, where they are like documenting and sharing the journey of building the brand, right, as a consumer of that information, you get to kind of quietly watch. And
Yeah.
in some ways, I think that's almost more powerful because, like, oh, wow, look at what this company is doing. And so I'm trying to kind of map those graphs for people in their minds, both actively through meetings like this, and passively through, sharing the journey on social. So
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And when you're launching into a very crowded category like beer, credibility is everything. So in those 90 days, now before the scale, before awards came along, before major retail came along, what did you focus to manufacture trust quickly? And what should premium spirits founders prioritize if they want distributors and investors to take them seriously from day one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that we'll say there's trust at the consumer level and then there's trust at the distributor level, right? So, what we'll start with the distributor. So what the distributor is looking for is traction, right? Are you selling? Is it working, right? Because they don't want to take something on and put effort in that isn't going to generate money for them, right?
Yeah.
And so the best proof is a combination of actual traction, like sales traction, which for us, we said, okay, we're going to launch, right? We're going to launch and we're going to spend money, sales and marketing dollars, to try and grow the brand quickly, right?
Hmm.
And we're going to spend it in a way that, like, financially is, aggressive, right? In terms of how you're doing this. And we're going to do that in the hopes that we can prove to this distributor that if they sell it, people will buy it, right? Because they are going to be much, much better at like going out and meeting 1,000 bars and restaurants than I'm going to be, right?
Yeah.
But if I can do it, even though I'm not that good, that proves to them that they're going to also be able to do it, right? And that people are going to buy it. And which is like a scary bet, right? Because we were like burning cash to grow as fast as we could before we ran out of money, in order to get the attention of these distributors, right? And
Yeah.
so I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of like, and then I think being very geographically focused, and I'm talking about the US, right? So I don't know how the distribution works in, more broadly, but like in the US, most of these distributors own, like, I own these 4 counties, right? Or I own this small territory. And so you say, okay, well, within that little territory, I can become a big deal. So we said, okay, we're just going to focus on these 2 counties for this one distributor within the Budweiser network. There are home counties where we want to get attention, right? And so all of a sudden they go, oh shit, you're popping up at every bar that we're carried in, right? And so for them, we feel like a very big deal, right? And that's because we're being very focused and very intentional about how we kind of do that. And so I think saying like, okay, I want to whatever is the smallest addressable market I can hit with a distributor that is important to me. I'm going to just blitz that area, right? And get their attention in every way, shape, and form I can. Events, tastings, samplings, and then actual like sales, right? And so that was, how we got and then obviously I think one of the things that people underrate is industry press, right? So it's like for us in the beer industry, it's Beer Business Daily, it's Beer Marketer Insights, it's BevNet, right? There's Beverage Daily. There's a set of publications, and it's much easier to get into those than it is to get into the Wall Street Journal or to get into the New York Times, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, those are the things like now I read those every day, right? And when I see something in there, it's a big deal. So like we got press in Beer Business Daily. We did what's called an embargo, where it's like, hey, we're going to give the launch story to you. You're going to be the only one that gets it in the industry. And then that led to, we had distributors from Atlanta, Colorado, the Northeast, Kansas, obviously California hitting us up, right? Like, hey, we want to carry you guys. And now we're not going to do that yet. But I think that industry press plus, really concentrated distribution in one region is how you'll get their attention. And then from a
Yeah.
consumer perspective, how you build trust is, I think, I won't even say that I'm not even sure how good we are at it yet, right? But I think that what we're doing that seems to be working is, I think face-to-face interactions matter much more than people realize, right? So we're
Yeah.
running, 3 to 6 events a week, right? And these are like, could be a pint night at a local restaurant, could be a sampling at a Whole Foods, could be whatever, right? Like, but getting that face-to-face interaction, I think people underestimate. Because yeah, sure, we've only had face-to-face interactions with, let's say, 10,000 people. But those 10,000 people, because they've now interacted with us, are much more likely to tell their friends, right? Than if they saw us in an ad or they saw us, in some other place, right? And
Yeah.
so, I think face-to-face interactions and liquid to lips, like getting people to actually try the product, is something that I think is really important. And then finally, the liquid matters a lot, right? Like, we spent well over a year developing these recipes. We probably threw away 40 or 50,000 beers and
Oh,
conducted 400 or 500 blind taste tests. And we wouldn't stop until we beat every lager in the market, with your eyes closed, until we beat them blind. And so, really kind of doing that, I think, is the other way you build trust.
Yeah. I mean, because you could have the best marketing thing in the world, but if it tastes like crap, nobody's going to buy in the end as soon as they taste it. But yeah, it looks like you're onto a winner there, bud. So in the whiskey world, right? Craft and provenance is pretty much everything. So what parallels do you see between clean brewing and premium spirits? And how can whiskey brands lean into transparency without losing that mystique?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's interesting because I agree. And it's the same thing for the beer industry. If you think about, the biggest beer brands or the biggest whiskey brands, like they get associated with like a physical geography often, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, we're trying to have our primary value proposition not be a physical geography, right? Obviously, we have a place that we're based out of, but we're trying to create something that hopefully kind of transcends or can cross, state boundaries, can cross national boundaries. But I think there's a real open question as to whether that can be done, right? Because it's not common, right? It's like, oh, if I want a Mexican beer, I drink Modelo or Corona. If I want an Irish stout, I drink Guinness. If I want a whatever. If I want a European premium lager, I drink Stella, right? Like you have these things that fit into these nice. If I want a Boston and Northeast beer, I drink Boston lager, right? Like or Anchor Steam for San Francisco, right? You have these like, so I think it's a real question whether we can cross that chasm, right, and not be just like associated with a physical place.
Yeah.
But I think that going back to the question on, whiskey brands and kind of repeat the question. You said, how can they transcend that, or how can they? What was the question?
Yeah. How can whiskey brands lean into transparency without sort of losing mystique?
Yeah, I mean, I think that transparency is a very powerful concept, right? Like there's a brand called Everlane that did this early on, and they said, "Hey, when you buy one of these really expensive T-shirts, normally it costs you $100, right? But we know that it actually only costs $7 to manufacture that T-shirt." And so they would actually break out kind of all the economics for you. Like here's the cost of the shirt, here's how much it costs to transport it, here's the overhead, here's this, here's that. And our price is, $40 instead of $100, right? But normally the shirt would
Mm.
cost $100. I'm not saying that's what a whiskey brand should do, but obviously that's something that we're doing, right? We're putting the ingredients on our label, we're putting nutritional facts on our label. We've now founded, there's an organization called the Clean Alcohol Collective that we founded now with like a half dozen brands where it's like you have to disclose your ingredients, you have to disclose, your nutritional facts, you have to, be at least 90% organic, right? These kind of different characteristics. And so I think that especially within a category where there historically hasn't been a lot of transparency, at least from a health perspective, it's something that gets attention, right? And so I think I don't know if this specifically answers the question for whiskey. I'm not saying this is what whiskey should do, but I do think that there's a space for that. It's like,
Yeah.
I was talking, if you look at the number of people that Google like Modelo and calories, like it's gone through the roof, right? Because nobody knows how many calories in
Yeah.
that. I don't know. And so I think I had that question the other day. I'm like, somebody's like, oh yeah, bourbon has a lot more sugar in it than, than scotch or than, rye whiskey. And I'm like, does it? Nobody knew. I don't
No.
know. Like,
Yeah.
is it,
No.
I have no idea. Like, and so I think there's going to be space for whiskey brands to kind of take the same approach.
Yeah. I mean, that's I'm kind of looking at you and jotting down notes here at the same time. So you've been on both sides of acquisition and growth, for example, your tribe dynamic sale. So from
Yep.
an investor's lens, what excites you about beverages and spirits today? And what red flags do you actually look out for?
Yeah. So I think, we'll just say as a personal investor, right? So I'm investing in this brand, both my time and cash. And
Defo.
so, when I think about this space, the things that excite me are, how many non-alcoholic beer brands are there right now, right? How many, protein shakes are there? How many new nicotine pouches are coming out, right? You have these like hot, sexy categories that are growing like crazy. And
Hmm.
say, whiskey is the same way, right? Like the thing I hear in the press is like there are, lakes full of whiskey sitting on the sidelines, right? That like, what are they going to do with all this whiskey and all these spirits? And so what that does, it's really interesting, is, nobody fishes there, right? Nobody's like, oh, that's where I want to go, right? And in some ways, that's like the best time to do it. And you see this as, when a lot of the most successful companies, so a disproportionate number of the most successful companies that are founded in technology and others are founded when there's a downturn, right? Because people get laid off, they don't have anything to do, and there's not a lot of money going in there. So it's like, it's very competitive, or it's very hard to do it, right? But there's more, it's like being in a lake and you're the only fish, right? You're gonna have a pretty good chance. And
Yeah.
so for me, looking at the size of the category, I mean, the amount of whiskey and beer sold nationally or internationally is just enormous. It's an astronomically large number, right? Okay, sure, yeah, it's going down 2 or 3% a year, but it's still 50 times as big as the non-alcoholic beer market, right? And so for me, that's the way that I think about it. There's just not a lot of competition right now, which is part of the reason that, we've been able to get shelf space so early and we've been able to get a lot of attention so early. There's just not a lot of, other stuff getting started. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing that excites me, right? And then I think also, and this is just something I would think about before getting into it, is like these do tend to be capital intensive businesses. I mean, they cost a lot of, the entry price is high, right? To kind of do it.
Yeah.
And so for me, what that favors is that favors experienced entrepreneurs with capital, right? And so for me, it makes it easier for me to do it today than it would have been for me to do it 10 years ago before I'd sold my company. And so that's an advantage that we have, and something that, is worth thinking about if you have it.
Yeah. And then just before we go, it would be remiss if I know that we spoke about it off air, and we were talking a little bit about that whiskey is your favorite spirit. Uh, so I got to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Um,
just to have a quick chat, what would your favorite whiskey be? Is it Scotch? Is it bourbon? What is it?
I would say, Scotch was definitely my first love. Mostly because, growing up, my grandfathers and my dad all drank Scotch, right? That was their whiskey of choice. I remember one time, both my grandfathers came over. My dad was supposed to come and he didn't come. And my grandfathers are very much polar opposites, right? One was a, 250 pound, the best sales guy you've ever met. And the other one had been in the military and was now an artist and worked out every day and was in great shape, right? So they were like polar opposites, one bald, one full of hair, the whole thing, right? And
Yeah.
so just very much opposites. And I remember my dad had bought a really nice bottle of whiskey or scotch, and he was coming home from work, but they got there early. And so by the time he got home at like 5:30 or 6, they had polished off the whole bottle. And
I love
they had
stories
sent
like this.
they had sent me to the store to go buy them another one, right? So I came back with another one, and and I remember watching a movie, and for the first grandfather didn't remember the first half of the movie, and the second grandfather didn't remember the second half of the movie, right? And so for me, Scotch has always had a place in my heart. And then I think in terms of individual kind of varieties, I wish I was more cultured. But like, I'm a big fan of, a lot of the things. Like I really like High West out of Utah. The Rendezvous Rye I think is really good. I'm a big fan of a lot of the stuff that Michter's is putting out. I still
Yeah.
like a Johnny Walker Blue, a Lagavulin 16, love a Macallan, right? Like I think I remember my grandfather when we got married brought me a Macallan 21. It was like, and what's funny is he gave it to me and it's our engagement party and I'm pouring out samples for everybody. And then I think either somebody told me or I Googled it and it's like, oh, this is a $700 bottle. And I was like, whoa, 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 give me that back. You know, like whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, so those are that's the, but yeah, it's definitely I do like all spirits, but that is by far my favorite spirit for sure.
Nice. I'd love to end on that. So that's it. Brilliant. Thank you, Connor. This episode was extremely invaluable. not only from your perspective and where you're coming from, but one from brand and distribution. Man, I love this conversation. Once again, thanks to my listeners and viewers of YouTube as well. Just before we go, Conor, if listeners or viewers, and I'm sure they will want to, get in touch with you, find out more what you're doing at Fathers, how can they actually do that?
Yes, I mean, email me. It's fine. Conor, CONOR, single N, at fathersbrewing.com. We got fathersbrewing.com as the website. We have Fathers at Fathers Brewing as the Instagram. So, just find us there. Come say hello. If you follow us on Instagram, we'll shoot you a note if you follow us automatically, just saying, hey, what's up? So, yeah, those are all the ways to get in touch.
Brilliant. Conor, thank you very much. That almost wraps up today's episode. Thank you for joining me, Conor. Really loved your passion and sharing it with everybody. Just before we end, quick reminder, this episode was brought to you by Whisky Wealth Mastery, where serious investors learn to build wealth through premium whiskey casks the right way. So if you've ever wondered whether whiskey could be something you own, grow, and monetize, not just drink, it might be time for you to have a closer look. If you want to learn more, you know exactly where to find me. You've been listening to the Wealth of Whiskey podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer. Today, I was joined by Conor Begley. Thanks again for listening and watching, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.